All take your seats. I think we can get started. So good evening and welcome to the forums for candidates from Districts 68 and 69. This forum is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Rhode Island and the East Bay Media Group. The League is a grassroots advocacy and education organization. We conduct voter registration drives, present candidate forums, and study issues that we promote after we have studied them. The League is nonpartisan. We never endorse a specific candidate or a specific political party, but we always welcome new members. Thank you to Scott Pickering, our excellent moderator, manager of the East Bay Media Group. Thank you also to Roger Williams for hosting us in this great room, and for Brittany and Heidi who have helped us set up. To our technician Joe, who is live streaming this event. It will be available through this, www.lwri.org, probably after tomorrow until Election Day. The candidates running tonight to represent District 68 are June Speakman and John Hanley. Our second forum will be Susan Donovan and Sergey Sharenko, who will come after a short break for the second forum. Each candidate will have 1 minute for an opening statement. Scott will ask the first of 6 to 8 questions. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer. The candidates also have wild cards. You want to just show up with the wild cards? Of 30 seconds each for comment and rebuttal. They can be used at any time, and they will be kept track of over here. Candidates will have 8 wild cards of 30 seconds each. Any unused wild cards can be used to lengthen the closing statement of 1 minute. So thank you all for being here. It's a wonderful crowd, and I'll hand it over to Scott.
Thank you. Okay, here we are. Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started. Familiar format: opening statements, questions, closing statements, wild cards that we can use throughout. I'll give a little overview of the wild cards. 30-second blocks of time you can use throughout. You could lengthen your opening statement if you choose by using some in that capacity. You can use them if we're on a topic like fill in the blank. You can probably guess what some of them are. If we're on a certain topic and you've exhausted your minute, you want to keep talking, you may use it then. If your opponent says something that you want to respond to, even after you've spoken on that topic, you can use it to jump back in and say more on the topic. And you can save some to the end to your closing statement, and you can lengthen the closing statement if that's what you choose. So lots of flexible use of the time that you can use throughout your program. It's all designed so that at the end of the night, both candidates have had an equal opportunity to speak and be heard. So we're going to begin with opening statements. I'm going to go sort of left to right. So I'll start with Mr. Hanley first with the opening statement, and then we'll move to Ms. Speakman.
Okay, hi, I'm John Hanley. I see a lot of people that I know, and I see some people that I don't know. I've been a lifelong resident of Bristol and Warren. I actually lived in Bristol for 3 years in my early 20s. I'm currently on the Warren Town Council. I've been there for 12 years. I'm currently the president of the Town Council. I raised my family in Warren for, from when I moved back from Bristol till now. I have 6 children. Luckily, they're all within driving distance. I don't have to fly a lot to see my grandkids, which is good, which is one of the reasons why I'm running, because I would like to keep Rhode Island a place where my kids want to hang around, so I don't have to fly all over the world. I'm currently the building official for the city of Pawtucket. I've been there for 18 years. Before that, I was a local contractor in Bristol, Warren. I did a lot of work in the whole East Bay area, so I'm very skilled at the zoning and planning issues that came up.
Thank you. You stopped right on the signal. I forgot to mention that we do have in the front row here 2 timers who are flashing the yellow sign when you're at 15 seconds left to go, and the red when you reach your time limit. Like I said, if you talk through that, it's fine. We don't want to interrupt you. Just keep talking, and we'll we'll record the wildcards, which are being recorded on the whiteboard over there when we use them. And I'll just help you to get through the evening without having to worry about too much of that stuff. Ms. Speakman.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks to the League of Women Voters and to the East Bay Media Group and to Scott for hosting this forum, and to Roger Williams University for providing the venue, and thanks to you all for coming. I am June Speakman. It's been my privilege to serve as representative from District 68 since 2019. I'm running for re-election this year in the hopes of continuing my work for the people of the district and of the state. In the House, I serve on 4 committees: Health and Human Services, Municipal Government and Housing, Environment and Natural Resources, and Oversight. And I'm also honored to chair the Commission on Housing Affordability. From those positions, I have worked with my colleagues on legislation regarding housing, nursing homes, solar energy, PFAS, which is a toxic chemical, and health insurance affordability. The goal of all this work is to foster a well-housed, healthy, clean, safe, and thriving Rhode Island. As we do this work at the State House, I remain firm in my commitment to be available to and responsible to the residents of Bristol and Warren to make sure that your government hears your concerns and addresses them, from the sidewalks of Main Street in Warren to the impact of the new lead paint law — I was on the phone about that for a long time today — on small landlords in Bristol. There is more of this work to do, and I ask for your support for another term so I can continue that work. I look forward to our conversation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. As you see, you went over your minute, so we zinged you
Thanks
with...
for letting me know.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
It's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with it.
No judgment, as the students say.
I'm
Yeah.
just pointing it out. Okay, we're going to start with the questions. I'll read the question. Both of you have a minute to answer the same question, and I'll alternate who goes first. All of these questions were submitted either ahead of time or tonight by the public. And thank you to all of you in the audience who submitted questions tonight on the index cards. Many of them are very similar, so I may ask a question that is touching on a topic you're interested in. It may not be phrased exactly the way you wrote it, but there's lots of similar themes. So, all right, Mr. Hanley, if elected to serve in the General Assembly, what is the one bill you will work the most diligently to pass in the next session?
The bill that I would most probably would be to pass would actually be to get rid of some of the bills that deal with the affordable housing issue. This whole affordable housing issue, by just creating units, you're not really helping Rhode Island residents. I know that firsthand because in Pawtucket, I've had mills come online with hundreds of units. And out of those hundreds of units, about 80 to 85% of them go to people from Boston and the suburbs because they're willing to pay an extra $1,000 a month and add the commute to their time. So all these units we're making are helping the suburbs of Boston more than they're helping Rhode Island residents. And one solution that I could propose to that would be, rather than link it to affordable housing, link it to with these ADU units. We give you zoning relief so you can add an accessory dwelling unit. Put a link on there where the limit is you have to rent it to someone that's been a Rhode Island resident for a minimum of 3 years or 5 years. That would also bring down the cost of it, because if you have to rent to a Rhode Island resident, they have to be able to afford it. So a lot of these breaks we're giving people are really only helping the developers and the landlords because they're getting the bigger rents from people out of state rather than making housing for Rhode Island residents.
Ms. Speakman, same
Yes,
question.
In the coming session, if elected, I would hope to actually work on the same thing that Mr. Hanley suggested, which is to make sure that the housing laws that we have passed over the last 3 years are in fact doing as they intended, which is to bring more units online, to bring rents and housing costs down for Rhode Islanders. I see no evidence that these units are going to out-of-staters, although that's very difficult to track because one of our problems with housing is that we don't have the data we need. A bill that I'm particularly fond of is one that I tried to pass last session, not semester. It's H7699, and that bill would bring my concerns about the environment together with my concerns about housing supply. It's the Housing Land Conservation Trust bill, which would allow for the state to purchase land and build housing on some of it and put the rest in conservation in perpetuity. It's a wonderful way to ensure that we're both adding units to our stock and also are providing conservation lands. It's a heavy lift because it brings two separate advocacy communities together, but I'd really like to work hard to get that one over the finish line. in the next session. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to check with the audience. Is the audio good for everyone? The mic? Yeah, I was thinking both candidates, you might want to move your microphones a little bit closer if you're able to.
How's that?
Thank you. All right, anything else on this topic? All right, we're going to move to a new question. Ms. Speakman, we'll begin with you. Should the General Assembly be doing more to address the critical shortage of primary care, mental health, and medical providers in the state? If so, what should be done? What do you think about the idea of building a medical school at URI?
Yes, of course, we should do more to address the shortage. On the Health and Human Services Committee, we hear over and over and over again stories from doctors, from patients, even from insurance companies about that critical shortage. About building a medical school in Rhode Island, I think the jury's still out on that. There's a commission that is working on that right now, chaired by Senator Loria, who also represents Bristol. They've just begun their work, so I'm not prepared to take a position on that right now. One thing we also need to do is make sure that the reimbursement rates in Rhode Island for insurance and Medicaid are equivalent or at least competitive with Massachusetts and Connecticut, so our docs don't leave the state and go practice in those two states. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hanley.
Yeah, as in the medical school, I need to see a little bit more evidence of its actual need for that particular school. The mental health issue, absolutely, we need to do more for that. That's one of the roots of the problems of a lot of the issues we have, the homeless issue. There's a lot of mentally disabled people, there's a lot of addicted people, and there's a lot of people who just need some guidance on how to get back into the workforce. So spending money on that rather than spending $3.5 million on 45 units of pallet shelters, which basically comes out to $77,000 per bed with shared bathrooms, I think that $77,000 would be much better spent on mental health, addiction counseling, and job placement counseling.
Yes, please.
Yeah. On the question of the pallet shelters, that's an issue that bothers me as well. They've been sitting there and no one is living in them yet, but I do think they are an essential element to addressing the problem of homelessness in the state. We can do both. We can both address the mental health crisis and address the fact that folks don't have a place to live.
Thank you.
I can
Yeah,
respond to that.
go right ahead.
Yeah, I agree. There should be shelters for the homeless. However, that's treating the symptoms of the problem, not the cause of the problem. We need to, the only way we're going to get this problem and really get a grasp on it is to get it where it starts, not to just enable and allow it to keep going. So that money, I think, would be better spent on the front end than on the back end.
Thank you. We're going to move to a new question. Mr. Hanley, we're starting with you. Last year, the General Assembly passed safe storage legislation, but neglected to pass the assault weapons ban. Do you support that ban? If so, what would you do to get it passed in the coming year? And is there any other gun-related legislation that you would recommend?
I would not support a ban on the assault weapons. I do believe in firm background checks. I believe in the red flag laws, where if someone's flagged by the police or by a mental health provider, that yes, absolutely, we should be able to go in and take those weapons away. However, I am a firm believer in the U.S. Constitution and the Second Amendment, not without any limits, but with reasonable limits, not just automatic bans, which just say this gun is guilty. More people get killed by pistols than they do by assault weapons. So I would not support that ban.
Ms. Speakman.
I'm a proud supporter of the assault weapons ban and a proud top 10 co-sponsor of that ban, and I hope we get it done this semester, this session. Quick role change. Assault weapons have no place in the hands of civilians. Police officers and military, yes, but certainly not in the hands of civilians. The mass shootings are carried out with assault weapons. There's no place for them in the hands of civilians.
Okay, we'll move to a new question. Ms. Speakman, we can start with you. What role should the state government play in combating climate change or developing green sources of energy?
The state government already plays a significant role in combating climate change. The Act on Climate was passed in 2020, I believe, maybe 2021, sorry about that, which sets out a plan to reduce emissions and to move us towards a more resilient green future. We have to have all hands on deck and all tools in the toolbox to do this: electrification of homes, addressing the burning of fossil fuels, moving towards a renewable energy future, and all states have to do that, the federal government as well. Local governments also have a role to play in combating climate change. It's absolutely all hands on deck.
Thank you. Mr. Hanley?
I believe that the state government has a role in that. The issue I have with that is I don't think they have a reasonable timeline for that. I think they're getting ahead of the technology. For instance, the landscapers. To change out their gas-powered blowers and their gas-powered weed whackers for battery-operated ones at this time, number one, the cost is ridiculous. You're going to put people out of business. You're going to cost people a lot more money to have their yards maintained, and the technology just isn't there. They just can't function the way these other ones do. When the technology catches up, absolutely, but we can't make the law until we have the technology to support that law. It just doesn't make sense to put the cart before the horse. You're asking people to do things that really aren't capable of doing at this time.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I understand the leaf blower reference. That was one of the bills that I attempted to move to passage 3 or 4 years ago. I learned my lesson there, that you do have to make sure that the technology is there and that the landscapers have the desire and the ability and the incentives from the state government to move into that new fossil fuel-free era of landscaping, and we aren't there yet. However, the state government needs to provide the incentives to move in that direction, not just wait for things to happen. We can't wait.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to just pause here to reset where we are. So we're halfway through our, at maximum, 8 questions. We've gone through 4 questions. You each have plenty of wild cards left. So feel free to speak. You have ample opportunity. If not, you're going to end up with both of you with 4, 5, 6 minute closing statements.
Aren't these good for a free drink if we don't use them?
They are, your opponent offered to pay.
That's fake news, but that's okay.
All right, next question, Mr. Hanley. Turning to the state budget, do you agree with how Rhode Island is spending nearly $14 billion annually? Does the state have the right priorities and focus, or would you work to shift how and where the state's resources are allocated?
Actually, I think it's 13.7, and I believe around 10 years ago it was just over 9. So in those 10 years, we've 1.5 times our budget, which is totally surpasses inflation. I think some of the money is being allocated in the wrong places. I'm not sure where a lot of it's going. I mean, all of this money that's been allocated for affordable housing, where did it go? It's all spent. Who's got it? I don't see a ton of housing units. I don't see a ton of affordable units popping up. Yet we've allocated millions and millions of dollars for this, and we have nothing to show for it. And being on the outside, I don't know where it went. Hopefully when I get in there, I'll be able to figure out where it went, and maybe we can redirect it somewhere else or lower the actual state budget.
Ms. Speakman, same question.
Yes, thank you. 14.7 billion is a lot, or 13.9 billion. 1/3 of that is for Medicaid to take care of the medical needs of hundreds of thousands of Rhode Islanders. Much of that money comes from the federal government as a match, so that is a large part of the spending, and we certainly can't do without that. A lot of that goes to support folks who are in long-term care. We certainly can't do without that. About affordable housing, that is about $500 million. That's a lot of money. That is in the pipeline, but as Mr. Hanley knows, as a builder, it takes probably 2 to 3 years to get a unit from site acquisition to getting the financial package together to building it. So those are in the pipeline, and we will start to see those soon, within the next year. About the rest of the budget, there are things that actually aren't in there that I would like to see, as one might imagine, given my leanings. For example, free and reduced price lunches, that program I would argue should be expanded to free lunches for all students with no eligibility check. I have a wish list, obviously most of us do. We need to move more money into climate resiliency, to shoring up our coastline, That's very expensive if you're going to move people away from, as in Belcher Cove in Warren or by Silver Creek in Bristol. If you're going to try to move those homes away from the coastline, that's a lot of money. Lots of that can come from the federal government. So I would urge us all, as we try to enhance our spending on climate resiliency and on school lunches and breakfasts, that we would try to leverage all the federal dollars we can. We have a fabulous federal delegation. Senator Jack Reed brings lots of big checks into Rhode Island, and we need to continue to work on that relationship to make sure that we're maximizing the federal dollars that we bring into the districts. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Hanley.
Regarding the affordable housing money that's in the pipeline, just recently a bill was passed which they passed all of these bills to supposedly make it easier and for development to happen. And some of the communities were a little reluctant in accepting them. Well, they just passed a bill which is going to make your local building official subservient to the state building commissioner. It has not been that way since the building code was created in 1978. Basically what it is, they gave you the Kool-Aid and now they're going to have the power to make you drink it.
Oh, yes, please.
No, it's up to you.
Yeah, no, please. The building commissioner bill doesn't do what Mr. Hanley says it does. We have a statewide building code that is monitored and implemented by local building officials. The bill that was passed in the last session makes sure that that monitoring is uniform statewide. It does not tell building officials, it does not interfere or override. If there is some lack of consistency across towns, the state building commissioner will come in and make sure that it is standard across towns. It also sets up a training program. There is a significant deficit of building commissioners in the state of Rhode Island. That is one of the reasons why housing starts and completions are delayed. And the training program that's included in the bill that Mr. Hanley refers to actually helps to deal with that deficit so that small communities that cannot afford to hire a building commissioner can get help from the state.
The bill, sometimes it's not what a bill says, it's what it takes out. The ability for the state building commissioners to step in was always there if the city or town requested it. What the language took out was that the language in the bill specifically limited the state building commissioner's duties to state-owned or maintained properties. That was taking out of the wording. So what that does, and it gives him full supervision over the entire building code, which means he has the final say when it comes to anything related to the state building code, local or statewide.
Yes, please.
Yep, now you're running thin, just so
Well,
you know.
you asked.
But go right ahead.
Okay. The state building commissioner is there to ensure that there is fair, equitable, uniform application of the state building code. There are no local building codes, there are local building commissioners. But this bill makes sure that a developer in Bristol and a developer in Warren face the same rules and regulations and monitoring and oversight. That's all it does. It does not interfere with local control at all. It doesn't change the building code at all.
Okay, thank you. Move to a new question. Ms. Speakman, we begin with you. State ballot question 1 asks voters to approve or disapprove of a constitutional convention. Opponents fear, in addition to many other issues, that well-funded special interest groups could use the convention as a means to constitutionally restrict women's reproductive rights. Do you share this concern, and do you believe that Rhode Island should hold a constitutional convention?
I share the concerns, and I will vote against question 1. In my view, a constitutional convention has a number of problems with it. One is that it will be very expensive. Some estimates are that it will cost $3 to $4 million to hold this convention and the actions that follow from the convention. Another objection I have is that there's a process already in place for changing the Constitution. It's called the amendment process. And in Rhode Island, that process is a lower bar than in the National Convention. It just requires simple majorities in the House and among the voters. And it is true that the folks who are most ardent in their support of this convention have an agenda that is hostile to LGBTQ rights, hostile to women's right to choose, and hostile even to religious freedom. So I oppose it for all of those reasons.
Mr. Hanley?
I would be in favor of it. When the Constitution was set up, this was a good idea. Why is it a bad idea now? I don't know if a lot of people know this, but the final say is a ballot. It's a referendum. The people, the residents of the state of Rhode Island would have to vote for any changes after this convention. They would just propose them, they would go on the ballot, and the citizens would vote whether or not to accept it. Sure, you're gonna have special interests pushing one way, and you're gonna have special interests pushing the other way. But this state was designed for this. The state was designed for this process. And I have faith in the citizens of the state of Rhode Island, that if these questions come up, they're gonna do the right thing. I think that the people should have the final say. So that's why I think I would support that.
Thank you. New question, Mr. Hanley, we start with you. Do you approve of the job done by Governor Dan McKee and DOT Director Peter Alviti regarding the Washington Bridge failure?
From the information I have, I can see the hardships that they're going through. I don't want to put the blame on them for the condition the bridge is in, because it's obviously been getting this way for a lot time longer. Of course, am I disappointed that we don't have a new bridge now? Absolutely. But being in construction, I know there's going to be issues. I think the handling of it from the time it was shut down to where it is now is probably the best they could do. I would like to see it step up a little faster and maybe expedite the schedule to be fixed. But I do think that the cards they were dealt, I think they're playing them right. They may have been dealt some bad cards, but for what they have to do, I think they're proceeding in an equitable manner.
Ms. Speakman.
Yeah, I actually don't know if they are proceeding well because we don't have the information we need to make those judgments. It will come, I assume, I hope. Along with all of you, I feel the pressure of crossing that bridge when I go to the State House, when I go to appointments. It slows all of us down, our families. We all know the stories that emanate from our experience with that bridge. We have in the East Bay, your East Bay legislators, the senators and the representatives, have pressed at our weekly or monthly meetings with Director Alviti. He meets with us by phone. We just had one yesterday morning. We press him on the lessons that they learned from the failed RFP. We still don't know the answer to that. They did a request for information to find out why no one bid. We still don't know why no one bid. And I want all of this information before we make any judgments about whether or not they did a good job. We still, as of yesterday, have no timeline. We press for it, and we press for it, and we will continue to press on our weekly calls with Director Alviti to try to get the answers that all of us deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Final question. Ms. Speakman begins with you. What have we not talked about tonight that you would like to talk about?
We've talked about housing, we've talked about climate change, we've talked about women's reproductive choice, we've talked about guns. One of the things that is a challenge to me is actually local infrastructure. As many of you know, there are sidewalks where you can't walk a stroller or on a wheelchair, and in addition to the big infrastructure like the Washington Bridge, the small infrastructure programs, I would really like to see another way to attend to the smaller but more meaningful in our daily life needs of local infrastructure. But that again gets to the bridges that are flooded. So I do think we need to up our game with local infrastructure as well.
Mr. Hanley.
I'd like to address that. My biggest complaint with the local representation is the lack of focus on Bristol and Warren constituents. Seems like the big focus is put on the great big pictures with the state, which is important. But if I'm elected, my main focus would be on the residents of Bristol and Warren. What's going to be good for the residents of Bristol and Warren? We've got some roadworks projects which are kind of been in the hopper forever, and they haven't been pushed forward. You know, if the council reaches out to me and has questions or concerns about a bill that's proposed, I'm going to be reactive to it. I'm not going to just say, hey, you know what, this is what the state wants, this is what the state's going to get. So my number one task would be to look out for what's in the best interest of the residents of Bristol and Warren first, and then second, what's in the best interest of the state.
Thank you. Thus concludes our question and answer session. We're going to move to closing statements, and you have your 1 minute closing statement plus your remaining time. Mr. Hanley, we'll start with you. You have up to 2.5 minutes if you'd like.
Oh, geez. I guess I can talk for that long.
You don't have to.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone, the league, Roger Williams, Scott, for holding this quorum. I want to thank the people in the audience the most. The more people that get involved in this process, the better it works. If more people got involved, it would actually make our jobs easier. In Warren, we have, and I'll use the wild card for that. This is like a free advertisement for Warren. We have a lot of open boards and commissions in Warren, and we can't get people to fill them. We need people to step up. The more people that work towards the solution, the better the solution comes out. So if I get your vote and I am elected, I do want to promise you that my #1 goal is going to be to look forward, to look out for the best interest of the people of Bristol and Warren. I've lived here my entire life. I know the culture of these communities. I know the festivals. I know the parades. I know this. I know that. I know how the people of Bristol and Warren think, and I kind of think like you. I was a small business owner in this area, so I know the hardships that the small businesses go through. I know that the state has a lot of pressing issues, which I would gladly jump in and help out with. But in the long run, the main concern of me being an elected official from Bristol and Warren is the residents of Bristol and Warren. The other issues, though important, would not take precedent over what I think was in the best interest of my constituents.
Thank you. Ms. Speakman, you have a minute and a half.
I'd like to revise and resubmit. I should have said education for that last answer. That, of course, is a central issue here, and I was not quick enough on that when I was listing through the issues we hadn't covered. In any event, thank you for this evening's conversation. It is my honor to represent Bristol and Warren in the House of Representatives. In fulfilling that role, I aspire to be attentive to the needs of the district and to work with my colleagues on statewide initiatives that address health care, climate change, senior services, education, housing, and the needs of small businesses. Should the voters of District 68 grant me the privilege of another term, I commit to ongoing communication with residents and municipal leaders of Bristol and Warren, and with our fabulous federal delegation who can help us with these bridges and small businesses, resiliency, and housing. When we work together, everyone wins. Along with my East Bay colleagues, we will continue to press DOT to get the bridge done and to address issues of trust, competence, and transparency that have clouded that project. And we've got to get this housing thing right. We need more units built, the right kinds of units in the right places. To get these built, we need data and planning and collaboration and funding from the federal government. I think we can do this if we work together. I ask for your support for another term so I can get to it. Thank you. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I got a free gift.
All right, we're going to take a short break while we switch things out, and we're going to bring on the candidates for District 69. Stick around. Okay, thank you, everyone. We're going to get started with the forum for State Representative District 69. Same format as we just followed. Same opening, same closing, same wild cards, same questions with 1-minute answers. You see your timers in front of you here. You see the wild card keepers over there. So we are ready to go. Some of the questions I'll ask you will be familiar. For the audience, I'll just say, they may be phrased differently. We'll touch on some familiar topics, but it's hard to avoid. It's difficult to have no overlap with what we just saw. So I will start over here with Mr. Sharenko with the opening statement.
Sure.
You may begin.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Sergey Sharenko. I live in the District 69. I'm running for the state rep. Basically, my platform is accountability, responsibility, and integrity. And I'm running on the agenda like housing, infrastructure, education, and the healthcare. So basically, I would like to go back to the basics. This is sort of like what we lost recently in the General Assembly, and we moved to being a bill factory. And the most important bill that we have is the budget, and it's a horrible failure every year. Okay, so we need to look at the budget and basically take care of the bolts and nuts of running the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Donovan.
Thank you. Thank you to the League of Women Voters, Scott from the East Bay Media Company, and my opponent for making this exchange of ideas possible. It's a great honor to have served as your legislator for the past 8 years, advocating on behalf of Bristol and Prudence Island. I'd like to continue the work bringing good public policy to our communities and state. At the General Assembly, I'm proud of the progress we've made this year within our budget. Tax relief for families and seniors, restoring the COLA for some retirees, and increased aid to school districts by $71 million. We'd made housing a priority for families and seniors, increased investments in Medicaid, and raised reimbursement rates for the medical services to our seniors and vulnerable populations. We've made investments in the Hope and Promise higher education scholarships, as well as Real Jobs Rhode Island for those taking a technical career path. I'm running for re-election to continue this work and to do much more. Thank you all in advance for taking the time to listen tonight.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move to the first question. Mr. Sharenko, we'll start with you.
Go ahead.
If elected to serve in the General Assembly, what is the one bill you would work most diligently to pass in the next session?
The only bill that's important is the budget. Okay, it's a runaway train right now. We should be on track to lose $2 billion next year due to the lack of funds from the pandemic. So our budget should be at least the same or lower, and we have to stop, basically throwing money away. Thank you.
Ms. Donovan.
Same question.
Same question.
Okay. The issue that's often overlooked that impacts the attractiveness of our region and our community when courting businesses to our state is the availability of childcare. The most proactive states view childcare as an advantage when competing for business and workers. It's a factor when ranking states' attractiveness for those businesses. When you see those ratings, Rhode Island is here, there, the other states are other places. When meeting with other legislators and the defense industry contractors at Raytheon this past year, housing was number 1 and childcare were number 2 of their priorities. Families can't relocate here if they can't find a house or a childcare facility in a reasonable amount of time. Right now, it's virtually impossible to provide high-quality childcare that working families need at a price they can afford. We have childcare deserts all over Rhode Island, and waiting lists are sometimes 8 months long. We have to do better, and it's necessary for the state's economic development. So that's a priority of mine. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll remind you guys you can use your wild cards at any time you'd like to jump back in. So, new question, Ms. Donovan. We start with you. Let's see. The extreme shortage of housing, and specifically affordable housing, is a crisis in all Rhode Island communities. Despite considerable money allotted and legislation enacted to address the problem, results have been negligible. What further action should the legislature take to make meaningful progress towards solving the problem? Sorry, I didn't write this one,
Okay.
but it was actually well written. It's just that my brain hadn't written it, so I'm sorry. What further action should the legislature take to make meaningful progress towards solving the problem of affordable housing?
Well, too many Rhode Islanders are cost burdened. We're paying more than 30% of their income on housing, and we've made an effort to deal with this, with this situation. And Rhode Island has the lowest housing production rate of any state in the U.S., and that makes home or rental unit pretty much out of reach, and for so many, and our children and grandchildren are being priced right out of this community. Unless we confront the impediments to housing construction, we can't solve the problem. I'm grateful to the House for forming the commission that my colleague, Ms. Beekman, she does a wonderful job with that housing commission. We're trying to make the permitting process for building housing and rental units easier and more efficient. And I think if we allow more flexibility in land use, we will hope to encourage more construction, particularly in multifamily and housing through adaptive use. I'd like to stress that this doesn't mean that our local zoning does not apply, only that the process is easier and appeals are handled more efficiently. Did I go over?
You
Oh,
did.
sorry. Thank you. All right. I wasn't looking.
You don't have to apologize. You got another 30 seconds to finish
Okay.
your thought if you'd like.
And we also, as Representative Speakman said before, we want the process to be consistent from community to community. And we want to help fund planning and technical assistance for our local building commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Schwanko, same question about affordable housing.
Okay, so last two sessions, the House and the Senate passed close to 30 bills on the housing, and I think most of them are detrimental to the communities in one way or another. So nobody wants to come here to build. Nobody wants to, own a company here to build, okay? So that's in part because we got too much red tape and too much regulations, and the prices are too high. So people have to pay all sorts of fees to build here. In the District 69, frankly, we're running out of places where to build, okay? And a couple of bills that we had, one bill would allow to build in the flood areas, and the other bill will allow to build in the REIT zones with the permit from DEM. Nothing could be worse than that, okay? So we need to start deregulating. Thank you.
Thank you. New question, Mr. Schwanko, starts with you.
Go ahead.
Do you support what many would consider common sense gun policies and laws, such as a ban on assault weapons, high-capacity magazines, bump stocks, and other rapid-fire devices, in addition to stronger background checks and waiting periods, secure gun storage, and gun dealer reform?
So I would support the common sense gun laws. That does not include bans. I don't like banning anything. I'm in no place to tell people what they can have and what they cannot have, okay? So we have a ton of bills. Some of them are completely unenforceable. Some of them just a feel-good, measure that was passed that nobody would ever do anything about. So we need to not restrict actual firearms. We need to restrict certain people from having a firearms, because we sure have a lot of people that should not be nowhere near any kind of a firearm, okay? And that will be, mental checks, and that would be red flag laws. So if people should not have firearms, they should not have any kind of a firearms. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Donovan, same question.
Thank you. Gun safety is supported by 70% of Rhode Islanders. When I talk to neighbors, a top issue is keeping military-style weapons out of the hands of civilians. No one will argue that we need to keep our kids safe in school, our citizens safe in public places, and our loved ones safe from suicide by firearm. As a former public school educator, I've done lockdown drills from kindergarten through high school, and I can tell you that those drills aren't enough to keep our kids safe. Mental health services can only reach those who seek help. I've had conversations with parents who are relieved when multiple siblings are not in the same school building. You see, that decreases the risk of losing them all in an attack. And that's the sad reality that parents are living with every day. We've made progress, but much more needs to be done.
Okay, new question. Ms. Donovan, we'll start with you. In your opinion, should Rhode Islanders make the choice to hold a constitutional convention?
I will vote against a constitutional convention for the same reasons that were stated just previously. I think the advocates who are pushing for that have an agenda that is risky, limiting workers' rights, limiting LGBTQ rights, blurring the lines between church and state. It's very expensive. I think it's $2 to $4 million just to run it. And we have a process to change our laws, and that's through legislation. And we elect officials to do that. So I will vote against it.
Mr. Schwenko, same question.
So I would be for having the constitutional convention. I'm an independent, so is the majority of people in the state. I don't have an agenda, so is the majority of people in the state. So there could be people from both sides coming in with the certain amounts of money trying to influence. So I think it would be a wash in the end. And then the amount of money that our administration is throwing away every day is 10 times more than what we will, try to put into the Constitutional Convention. So I think we should have it. At least people should have a choice.
Thank you. New question. Mr. Schwenko starts with you. You've mentioned the state budget already, so we're going to talk about that a little more deeply. Do you agree with how Rhode Island is spending its nearly $14 billion annually? Does the state have the right priorities and focus, or would you work to shift how and where its resources are being allocated?
So I think we're doing a horrible job. I think the administration right now is basically on no leash. They running around, and especially like you will see what's happening with the infrastructure right now. We're throwing money, one bundle after the other. Administration have to be on a very short leash, and that's the job of the House and the Senate. Money had to be given out in a very small doses with the proof that they actually spend that money on something tangible. That's one thing. And then the other thing is our reimbursements for the healthcare. Doctors are leaving because we're not reimbursing them. Nurses are leaving. We cannot have any CNAs. That's a big, big issue. Thank you.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, same question about the state
the
budget.
same.
Do you agree with how Rhode Island is spending its nearly $14 billion annually? Does the state have the right priorities and focus, or would you work to shift how and where the state's resources are being allocated?
Well, the budget, it's a huge document, and we take a lot of time. We go through it article by article. We do a lot of talking to it. It's a document that reflects our priorities as a state. I serve on the Health and Human Services Committee, and the legislation I see directly impacts the health and well-being of all Rhode Islanders, and that includes primary care. I know Mr. Schrenko just talked about primary care. We've raised Medicaid reimbursement rates for children and seniors, which impacts primary care doctors. We protect patients from annual and lifetime limits on health insurance benefits. We've allocated $20 million to fully fund provider increases for behavioral health, children's and home-based and community health services. I think these are things that are really important to Rhode Islanders. In response to concerns about primary care, Blue Cross and Blue Shield eliminated nearly 65% of prior authorization requirements, allowing primary care doctors to expedite care for patients and relieve the administrative burdens on their practices. We are losing primary care doctors, and there's a commission to study that I happen to be on. That will take at least 10 years, though, in my opinion. You know, seeing primary care and doctors, an increase in them, but I think we have to incentivize having doctors stay here in Rhode Island. It's market driven. Why would you stay in a place when you can go over the line and get 20% more? So it's a big issue. As far as the budget goes, sure, there are places, we all have differences of opinion on what we could cut and what we could add, but it's like I said, there's a lot that goes into it, and I think it's a thoughtful document. Thank you.
Thank you. New question, Ms. Donovan, we're going to start with you. What policies would you initiate or support in order to help people who are living with substance abuse disorders or mental health problems?
Well, I just mentioned that we fully funded provider increases for behavioral health. That was a real issue for providers. You know, and we need to increase mental health services for children. Whether we do that in the private sector, in schools, I think it's really important that we pay more attention to children's mental health. I forgot the last part of your question. Was that?
Just policies that could help support people with substance abuse disorders and mental health problems.
Funding. I just think we need to pay more attention to funding adequate services and make sure that we reimburse the practices and make sure that patients get the adequate health care they need. Thank you.
Mr. Sharenko, same question.
So I think we have to be really careful how we spend the money that we are, you know, basically using right now, and that has to be, we have to categorize people that with the serious mental issues or with the people that just want to do drugs, okay? Because some people have actual issues, some people don't want to be helped. So if people don't want to be helped, why are we wasting money on them, okay? Thank you.
Okay. All right, new question, Mr. Sharenko.
Go ahead.
Several climate-related bills were passed by the General Assembly in the last session, but several were not. What should Rhode Island do about climate change and climate resiliency in the short term? In particular, what would you advocate for Warren, Bristol, and other East Bay towns that are affected by rising water levels?
So locally, we have massive issues with the flooding, okay? The bills that we pass are actually detrimental to the District 69, okay? Because a lot of them would, like I already said, allow people to build in the Rhode areas and in the flood zones. Like we were trying to put a hotel the Gooding Avenue, basically filling up the flood zone. And the more concrete boxes go in the ground, the more issues we will have. So we have to be very careful how we build, where we build. Okay, as far as the bills that we passed, a lot of them are basically pieces of paper. So they're not going to be helping anybody. They might help some nonprofits to use that money for their, you know, issues, but they're not going to be helping actual people. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Donovan?
Thank you. Our coastlines are particularly vulnerable to sea level rise caused by climate change. It threatens our homes. Even neighborhoods away from the coastline they're flooding, as we saw in the recent storms down south. It threatens our infrastructure and it threatens our business districts. A lot of our businesses are right along the water. We've mandated the creation and maintenance of a statewide coastal resiliency plan to assess our community's vulnerabilities. We recommend mitigation strategies along rivers and coasts, and most importantly, recommend financing strategies. Finding the revenue sources to fund these projects is an ongoing challenge at both the state and the local level. I know we rely on the federal government for a lot of this money, but they're not going to be able to fund a lot of it when the crisis really hits us. I'm proud that Rhode Island is a clean energy leader, and we have the first offshore wind farm. I'm glad that we have Act on Climate, and we have goals that we want to meet. We have goals that we have to meet, But I think looking for funding sources in the future is going to be the real problem. Thank you.
Yes, please.
So as a response, climate changes all the time. I mean, as long as we have the written history of the world, climate is changing. And we had the ice ages, we had the warm-ups, and whatever we are trying to do might not be very much, versus the planet. What we can do will be trying to make the decisions that are comprehensive, what serves certain areas. Because what's happening in Woonsocket is different from what's happening in the District 69. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, Ms. Donovan, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on the job done by Governor Dan McKee and DOT Director Peter Alviti regarding the Washington Bridge situation?
I think, well, I'm just as angry as everyone else about the bridge. I use the bridge, my family members use the bridge, and the safety of the commuters is the highest priority for me. As Ms. Beekman said, we have meetings regularly with Director Alviti. We passed legislation so that he would have to meet with us. I think the bridge, it's the failure of the highest order. It puts public safety at risk. A forensic analysis will hopefully tell us what went wrong and what agencies are responsible. We have a pause right now in the demolition because we don't want to destroy the evidence of that analysis. I think we have to wait and see. I want to make it clear to everybody, though, that the governor is responsible for the Department of Transportation. We can ask questions. We can call them to oversight. We can demand that he speak to us, but we don't have the power to do much else. And it's very frustrating, and I know you are all frustrated, too.
Mr. Schranko.
So I think Governor and DOT are doing a horrible job, okay? And what's worse, they are throwing millions of dollars onto the problem thinking that it will go away. It's not going away. And it's only a beginning of our issues, because that's one bridge out of 200 that we have in the state. We have a bridge right over here that's barely there, okay? So the issue has to be in the next budget. The governor has to start showing results before he gets more money, okay? And that's the only way to keep him on the short leash, because he's not doing a good job, and that's just proven. We all know it. Thank you.
All right, we'll move to our final question, and you both have a decent amount of wild cards left, so you're welcome to use them, and we are flying through this forum, so we're on a good pace. Question, Mr. Schwenko, what have we not talked about tonight that you would like to talk about?
The education. So I would definitely like to talk about the education. It is an issue here. I guess it's a more issue with the Kikimewit. We all know it. So the Warren PD is there constantly. So they have kids fighting, kids doing whatever stuff. So we have lesser issues in the lower classes and in the higher classes. Then again, we passed the bond to build a new high school. Now Warren has financial issues. They lost 2 major lawsuits. I'm afraid we'll be left up here in the Bristol holding a bag. So we will have to really carefully look at that, okay? And that's without even talking about the quality of the education that children get. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Donovan.
There's so many issues, it's hard to pick. I'd like to talk a little bit about tax relief and pensions, because we've made some progress in that area. We've raised the exemption on certain pension plans and annuity income for seniors, $20,000 to $50,000 for a qualified single filer and $100,000 for joint filers. Most small business owners no longer have to pay a burdensome tangible tax on computers, furnishings, and fixtures and the like. Over the past several years, we've fully eliminated the car tax ahead of schedule. We've repealed the suspension of annual cost of living adjustments for state employees who retired before 2012 versus teachers. So I think we've made I think we've made progress on the tax front, and we continue every year to try to help, especially seniors and young families, pay, have tax credits and pay less taxes at the state level. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're moving to closing statements. Mr. Schrenko, we'll start with you. You could have 4.5 minutes if you'd like.
I will do my best. So I'm running as an independent. So that means that the only people that I am basically accountable to is you, okay? People that live in the district. So I'm very well known of saying no, to certain things, but I usually look at the some type of consensus, okay? And that's what we lost. I think in the General Assembly, the majority rules, and the voices that say no are not heard, so it's one-sided, and it's starting to hurt us, It started to hurt us on the state level. So we need more to talk to each other. We need more to have a consensus and to have some type of a possibly the outcome that nobody likes, but everybody can live with. Okay, so that's what I'm running at, and also we lack the contact of the General Assembly members with the town council and with the town administrators. And that's what I would pledge to do. I would pledge to if I win the elections, I will have at least quarterly reports to the town hall. Okay, what is going on, what kind of bills are happening, because we had already twice the instances where the town council was apoplectic after they found out that, first 15 first bills on the housing passed, then another 15 bills on the housing passed. Now they had to deal with all that, basically falling down on their heads because we had no contacts between the General Assembly and the town government. We have to reestablish that. It has to be done. And of course, people have to know what is happening there. The General Assembly members getting 10 days to look at the budget, and it's written just about in Chinese. People have to start looking at the budget the moment the governor releases it, okay? Because everybody have to know what's in it, where's the money going, and how come there's so much money going. All right, thank you so much.
Can I use a wild card to respond? Is that before the closing statement?
I think you could just wrap it into your closing statement.
Okay.
It's we're on closing statement. You have up to 3.5 minutes.
Okay.
So the floor is yours.
All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is respond to what he just said. If any bill is problematic for our communities, for our town council, representatives and senators are more than willing to address that issue. That's our job. We did meet before this year's legislative session and during it to communicate this to our municipal officials. The League of Cities and Towns is a great resource that advises our mayors, our administrators, and our councils on bills affecting their communities. The League worked closely this year with the Housing Commission and did not oppose any of the housing bills that came to the House floor. The League gave Representative Speakman and me a 9 out of 9 score for our votes that were a priority for the League. So that's all I have to say about that. Now I'll move on to my closing statement. Sorry about that. So, as your state representative, I have an 8-year record of shaping public policy on a multitude of issues, ranging from housing, education, pay equity, public health, the environment, business regulation reforms, fair taxation, gun safety, and reproductive health care, and that just names a fraction. For those who are seeing me for the first time, I grew up here, attended our public schools and colleges. I earned a bachelor's and master's degree and taught in our public schools for over 3 decades. My full bio is on my website. In 2022, I was appointed chair of the Health and Human Services Committee. In that role, I not only oversee the testimony of witnesses, but I am also responsible for meeting with leaders in healthcare and with public health advocates. all whose efforts influence public health policy in Rhode Island. As I mentioned before, in response to the concerns raised in our committee, Blue Cross and Blue Shield eliminated nearly 65% of our prior authorization requirements, allowing primary care doctors to expedite care for patients and relieve the burdens on their practices. I also serve on the Education Committee and the Veterans Affairs and Oversight Committees. I've spent my entire adult life in public and community service, working and advocating to improve the lives of those who live in this exceptional place we call home. As you've heard, a priority of mine in the coming year will be addressing the availability and crippling costs of childcare for struggling young families in Rhode Island. Finding the solutions to the many problems we face takes time and collaboration, but I'm convinced we can make progress if we have the collective will to work together. In this coming election, I'm asking you to trust that I will continue to be a thoughtful and reasonable voice for our district and come out to vote for me on November 5th. Thank you.
Thank you. And before the applause, I just want to say thank you both to the candidates. Thank you to everyone who helped put this together. I'm just sitting here thinking about, I've been doing these forums with the League of Women Voters for many years, and I remember some of the first ones when Joanne DeVoe and her husband and maybe one other person from the League and I were sort of putting these together, and it was a very small group of volunteers with the League of Women Voters. This year, it actually just dawned on me, it's an unbelievably deep roster of people volunteering. Every forum that we're at, there's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 volunteers from the League. And so credit to them. As they're getting older, they're getting stronger. And when I say the League is getting older, they're getting stronger. So credit to them. They do a wonderful job. They do all the organizing. They do all the publicity. They run the show. So great job to the League, and thank you all for being here. Great job to the candidates.
We did it, survey.
I just want to close. Is this on? I just want to close by thanking all of you for coming. Thank you to our candidates. And Scott, you gave us credit. We also give you a lot of credit because Scott has done this moderating for years. So don't forget that next week we have a forum in Warren for the Senate District 10 and the Town Council candidates. So that'll be a good forum up at the Town Hall in Warren on October 7th. That's Tuesday. And don't forget that the taping from tonight will be available on the League website. If you go there, www.lwrvi.org, it'll give you a link to YouTube. So take care of that. Okay, thank you all, and you can go home for the debate now. Yeah.